Hey, Magic fans, Jonathan here. Just wanted to jump on here for a quick second. When you saw this episode, you might notice, oh my gosh, this thing is almost 2 hours long. Yeah, we talked about a lot. The season is over. There's a lot to talk about from these exit interviews, but we're taking the next week off. So if you want to listen to all this content, it's really evergreen. Nothing's really going to change between now and the next few months even from a lot of things that we talked about. So feel free to take 2 days, 3 days, maybe a whole week to listen to the entire episode here. But then Kevin, myself, we will be back ready for action, ready for the entire offseason. So once again, thank you all for a great season. We appreciate your support so much. And yeah, enjoy the episode. This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast with your hosts, Kevin Tucker and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic. What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is May 5th, 2025. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by my co-host, Kevin Tucker. Kevin Tucker, it's been a while, no Magic basketball. How are you doing, my friend?
Happy Cinco de Mayo, first off, 5th of May. Yeah, doing okay. Obviously, it's been a few days since the Magic season ended up in Boston on Tuesdays. We've had some time to decompress and reflect, and we'll talk about all that. But yeah, doing pretty good. Trying to enjoy the NBA playoffs from a third party perspective now, since my team's out. The Pacers are about to beat the Cavs in Game 1. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, man. I have been enjoying, some of the other playoff offerings, and to be able to sit back, like I turned the Pacers Cavs game on earlier, and anytime I put any kind of sporting event on, the girls are always, "Daddy, who do we want to win?"
Yeah.
And I was just able to honestly say, I don't care, right? Like that was not having that emotional stake, at least for now, is a nice little bit of a breather. You and I say every season when things end that it's kind of bittersweet, right? Like, especially this year where the whole kind of last half or, almost 2/3 of the season were so tough.
Yeah.
And knowing that you most likely were not going to be able to advance past this first round series, really regardless of who the opponent was, and knowing that this season very much had a pretty soon expiration date on it, kind of sort of looking forward to the offseason and knowing where we can really do the work to improve this team. And then the season ends and you're sad that your team loses, but this is where you and I get to just like take a little bit of a break. And like, I'm okay that there's not basketball that we have to live and die over right now. Ask me in 2 weeks and I'll be ready for Magic basketball to get started again.
Well, you said something. You said, when they asked you who are you rooting for, you said you don't care for this game. What about tonight?
Your Pacers?
No. I'm saying, what about tonight? Celtics Knicks. Are you going to say you don't care, or do you have a rooting interest in that one?
Go New York, go New York, go!
Oh, brother, yeah. That's the thing. Like, it's the lesser of two evils for me. Like, I don't really tend to like New York sports. If I had to pick one, the Knicks are probably the most likable out of Yankees. No offense.
The Giants? What's wrong with the Giants?
Well, I mean, they've got a couple Super Bowl rings in the last 15 years, so it's just
sure.
But the Knicks, like, obviously they haven't won in a long time. But then you add the whole Celtics thing that we just went through. I am absolutely rooting for the Knicks for the next 2 weeks. I don't think they can do it, but you never know. I'm going to be rooting for them, that's for sure.
Yeah. What about do you care about Game 7, Golden State, Houston?
Just for the simple fact that I picked Houston to win in 5 games, I'd like to see Houston win just so I feel a little more right. But yeah, I was a big believer in Houston coming into the playoffs, so I would like to see Houston win. Yeah, and plus I don't like Draymond Green, so I don't want him to win anything.
So whoever wins this moves on to play the Timberwolves. One day we are not going to have like Steph Curry playoff performances anymore. So if we get, 1 or 2 more of those this year, hey, including tonight even, who knows? Like, I'm not really going to be mad about that. But yeah, I don't want to see the Celtics win it all. Other than that, pretty much anybody I'll be happy with at this point. The Celtics would still be my pick. I still think they probably will get it done. But yeah, it is kind of nice this time of year to say, you know what? Whoever wins, as long as everybody has fun, everybody go have fun. Nobody get hurt.
Both teams played hard.
Really cares. Yeah, Maybe those are the friends that we made along the way,
Yeah.
So we're gonna save the full season autopsy for a future episode. We have a very lengthy off season ahead of us. There's gonna be plenty of things to talk about between now and basically the end of September before we get to media day and then into training camp and preseason and all that kind of stuff. So we are going to have a more, and I do think I haven't fully processed the season yet, even though it did end 6 days ago. We had the exit interviews on Thursday, and watching through all that a couple of times, Thursday and Friday, and the Jeff Weltman interview on 96.9 The Game with Mike Bianchi, and then the Anthony Parker interview with Brandon Kravitz on 96.9 The Game. All of that I've just been kind of sitting on and stewing on for the last few days. But Kevin, now we are, I think, 6 days removed from the Magic regular season. Thoughts, feelings, what will you sort of reflect on in the future when you think about this season?
Yeah, it's tough. I think the way we lost game 5 kind of soured things a little bit for me. You just get absolutely blown apart in that second half, right? And that just, like I said, just leaves a little bit of a sour taste after you fought really hard, especially in games 2, 3, and 4. You were right there. It was very close. And even the first half of game 5 was close. So that kind of leaves a sour taste. But I will say on the whole, this team was dealt a lot of adversity this year. The fact they were only 6 games worse than last year, I think, is nothing short of a miracle and deserves some credit. But it does feel like a lost season in some ways, right? This is another year of Paolo, Franz, Jalen, the list goes on. You're only going to get a few of those. Even if those guys spend their entire careers in Orlando, you only get, 2-3 handfuls of them. And so to have one that feels like it totally lost, because of injuries and circumstances, that's a little bit of a bummer. But again, I'm encouraged by the fight. But at the same time, it's also a very clear indicator that some things need to change this summer, and I'm definitely looking forward to that.
I'm going to be a little bit of a salty sailor here for a second, because I've got to go back to Game 5. I would agree with you in the way that Game 5 went down had I not felt that third quarter was orchestrated. To the umph degree. And I know we've talked about the Banchero fouls, but you go back to that third quarter, the very first offensive possession for the Magic. Paolo's posting up Derek White. Derek White is all over Paolo, grabbing at his arm, pulling him. No call. Paolo gets the ball, turns around. There's contact, but to me, it looked like Derek White flopped. That's a foul. We go down to the other end. The first bump on Jaylen Brown, foul. Magic go down to the other end. Paolo doesn't really see the ball that much in that possession. There's really no opportunity for there to be a whistle, so there's not a call. We go back down the other end. He's not guarding the ball. Again, no real opportunity to blow the whistle. Very next defensive possession down is the Jaylen Brown elbow to the chin. That's his third whistle. And I think a minute and a half into, or 2.5 minutes rather, into that third quarter. And looking at the way that the Eastern Conference playoff bracket is breaking down, do I think potentially maybe there's a slight chance that the NBA wanted the Celtics to get healthy for a good series against the Knicks? And then on the other side of the bracket is Cleveland and Indiana. Do they want to make sure that the Celtics are playing in the Eastern Conference Finals? I absolutely would not put that past Mr. Adam Silver. So had that third quarter not gone down the way that it did, and any chance that the Magic had at making that a competitive game, because it was a competitive game up until that point, Tony Brothers completely evaporated that. So had that not been the case, I probably would feel that way. And I know you're potentially still going to disagree with that. But yes, does it make it a little bit easier to sit here and say, well, we got killed in Game 5. Even if you win Game 5, you're not winning this series. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to deal with and kind of move on from this series pretty quickly, because once we beat Atlanta and we kind of, had the series in hand that we were, going to be playing in the playoffs against the Celtics, and especially once we won Game 3 and said, okay, at least we're not getting swept. At that point, everything was house money. The Magic didn't really have anything to lose at that point. So it has made it a little bit easier for me to move on emotionally from this season.
The only thing I'll say to that is it possible that is it possible in this scenario that the NBA wanted the Celtics to beat the Magic? Sure, of course. Is it possible that the NBA actually wanted the Celtics to beat the Knicks? That feels very far-fetched. Like the New York Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals, you know how crazy the NBA would go for that.
Who do they think, though, has a better chance of actually making it to the finals? They're playing the long game here. Even if the Knicks find a way to beat the Celtics, are they going to be able to beat Cleveland? I really don't think so.
Well, right now, Cleveland can't beat Indiana, so they should focus on that. The NBA needs to step in if they're concerned about that. But I don't know.
The obviously, Midwest Championship, the Midwest Conference or whatever is
that
going
feels
on
very
over
far-fetched. But I would agree, some tough calls. But at the end of the day, I mean, was it doing? Prolonging the series by a game, maybe two? Like, there's no way.
I'll never forgive Tony Brothers.
Yeah, that was bad. That was bad from Tony Brothers.
Never convince me otherwise. But for me, it's going to go down as a lost season, other than sort of the grit and resolve that this team showed the last 2 months of the season and then into the playoffs. And we came away from that series knowing that, like, hey, we've got, without a doubt, if you don't count Jalen and Mo, like, we know that those guys are going to rise to the occasion when it comes to the playoffs. And we really already knew about Franz and Paolo, but this cemented it. Like, not only can those guys be really good in the playoffs, but those guys can be, I think they were two of the best three players in that series,
Yeah.
Paolo and Tatum are probably right there. You can really argue either way. And then I think Franz outplayed Jaylen Brown in that series. So 2 out of the 3 best players, you could argue 1 and 3 in a series against the defending champs. And, at this point, the favorites to go on and repeat. I'm really happy about that. And then we saw other guys show that they were mostly ready for the moment. Guys like Wendell, Anthony Black, and then we have kind of a lot of question marks on this roster, obviously, which I know, again, we have a ton of time to talk about between now and September. But yes, what is going to be the most painful part of this season is looking back and saying, what if Paolo and Franz don't tear their obliques? And then what if Jalen doesn't get hurt? And you're never going to have a season that's completely injury-free. But if those guys are able to stay reasonably healthy and then healthy going into the playoffs, it's just a different ball game, right? Like, I think we're probably playing Cleveland right now in the second round. It ended up the 4 seed, or maybe you're the Knicks playing the Celtics in the second round. And then we can argue all day about how things would go in the second round. You would have a really good chance at winning either of those series. Like, we'd be saying this second round series against Cleveland or against New York or Boston should go 6 or 7 games, and the Magic will have a chance to win the series. And because of injury luck, and for really no other reason than that, we didn't get to see that this year. And I hadn't even looked at it from the angle that you're talking about, where, hey, if we get 12 really good Paolo and Franz years, a couple of them, well, one, we lost to the team just being bad, like Paolo's rookie season, and then we had a really, really fun season 2 with Paolo. And then the third season was we were just completely robbed of by injuries, and that sucks. And I know the next thing we're going to go into is a lot of the exit interviews, which there were definitely some themes, just like there are every year. Like last year, it was we made the playoffs. And next year, we need to have home court advantage. We learned how important it is to have home court advantage in the playoffs. And this year, really the main takeaway was that basically the team didn't give up and they stuck together and all that kind of stuff. But it was a tough season. When Jamal Mosley says it felt like it was 4 or 5 seasons in one, it really did feel like that. The fact that, one, it's already been 6 months, like since we were there at opening night, and now it is, opening night, but even before that, the first game of the year against the Heat. To think it's already been almost 7 months now since then, and at the same time that it's only been 7 months since then, are both equally kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's true. And the only other thing, I guess with like the exit interviews and stuff, which we'll talk about. But yeah, I mean, the theme was, like you said, the grit, the determination, the all those things. But it's also a reminder that those things only get you so far, and there are some other things that are required in order to see success in the playoffs. And so, again, going back to just, I guess, silver lining, going back to that game 5 ending, the fact that the gap statistically between the shooting numbers between the two teams was so wide. There was a fear coming into the playoffs that, if the Magic, have put on a good showing, then maybe the front office, they won't be so quick to make changes because, if we're healthy, we'll be better. Nah, that's just not a thing. And so fortunately, in some of the stuff we heard on the exit interviews from the front office and such, it sounds like there will be some moves this offseason for sure.
Listen, there is one line, and maybe we won't go all the way into it right now because I know we're going to talk about the exit interviews and some of the radio interviews next. But there is a line that was brought up by Weltman, was brought up by Anthony Parker, where I go, okay, this is most likely them being able to hold on to some leverage in negotiations going into the offseason. But if they are like really bought into this one statistic that got brought up, makes me go, I really don't like that. And when we get to that, maybe I'll bring that up and go into a little bit further detail. But it does seem like looking like if we're all in a room, like trying to come to a consensus, like, hey, everybody kind of agrees what needs to happen here, right? Like it does feel like everybody's on the same page. The front office, a lot of the players, some of them, when they were asked about, hey, like, what does this win now mean? They got a little bit like, I don't really know exactly how I feel about this kind of stuff. And we'll break that down as well. But it feels like everybody kind of knows that the offense has to get better. This team needs to make the next step. And I'm hoping that when we take a look back at this season, 4 years, 5 years from now, we can look back and say, hey, that season sucked, but it was the necessary evil to force this team into the next stage. And that's what led to all these amazing other things happening. And that's really and ultimately what I'm hoping we're able to take away from this season. But that's something that we're not going to know for quite a while still. So for now, we're kind of just crossing our fingers and hoping and praying that all of this stuff works out, because it's hard to get to this point where you do have a really promising core. I think it's even harder to take that core from like, hey, we're pretty good to contending level and making sure that you get it right, because you have to get everything right in a given year, and everything has to go right in a given year for you to be able to get it done, like win a title. And ultimately, that's what we all want. Sure, we want to say, hey, the Magic in the 2020s or the later part of the 2020s, like we're true contenders for 4 or 5 years, like going into the early 2030s. But if we say, but they got close, but they never got it done, or look, that was when they only got one, maybe. But listen, if you fast forward 50 years from now and I'm on my deathbed and I say, just tell me they won one, and you say yes, I can die peacefully.
That's right.
And if not, then I'll find a way to haunt you all for the rest of however long I can.
Yeah, I mean, look at Milwaukee right now, right? Look, Milwaukee obviously draft Giannis. They go all in to surround him with great talent. They get that title. It's fallen apart since then, right? Like, I mean, obviously right now, this summer is, I mean, maybe the biggest question marks in the league right now are in Milwaukee. But you ask any Milwaukee fan, are they going to say it was worth it to get that one, their first one in, 50 years or whatever it was? I bet all of them say yes. In spite of all the controversy and the drama and the health issues now and all those things, I would bet that every single one of them say it was all worth it because they got their title. And so, yeah, sign me up. If that's what it takes, sign me up.
There's probably nothing like basketball wise and like, things that are very reasonable and don't include anything crazy. There's almost nothing that I wouldn't sacrifice to win a title. Like, if I don't want to talk about our present guys, I don't want to jinx anything, but if we could go back and be like, hey, Dwight still ends up leaving, but you win a title, would you rather him stay forever when I'm taking the title every single time? Like, hey, I already dealt with the pain of him leaving anyway.
Right.
So like, yeah, I would rather have the title kind of over everything. So
yeah,
let's go ahead and pivot into the exit interviews. And I think really where we should start, and kind of, I guess it makes the most sense even like chronologically, would be go back to Jeff Weltman's interview on Open Mic with Mike Bianchi on 96.9 The Game on Thursday morning, like ahead of the exit interviews. I think that was at like 8 in the morning, and then the exit interview started like around 10. First of all, credit to Mike Bianchi. Did a great job. Like, really, short of asking about like getting squeezed at the deadline and all that kind of stuff, which was asked later on. Jason Beatty did a great job during the exit interviews, but short of that, that was really the only thing maybe that he didn't ask that I really wanted him to hear. One of the biggest things was at the trade deadline, like, would he change his mind? Like, if he could go back and sort of redo the trade deadline over. And what he said, and a lot of things here we're paraphrasing, but he said that they felt the price tag was a little bit too heavy in their discussions for what they were effectively looking for was expiring contracts. And that ultimately he was happy that the team landed on a way to play towards the end of the season. And that's something that was also echoed. That was today, I believe. When was the Brandon Kravitz interview with Anthony Parker?
Either Friday or Saturday.
Was that Friday? Okay. Yeah. Probably would have been Friday. I think you're right. And he said, like, effectively they were looking at expiring contracts, which tells me that what they were most likely looking to do was get underneath the apron potentially, so they had a little bit more flexibility this summer. And when it sounds like they were only looking for guys who were expiring. And he said it really would have been a rental for them. They're not giving up Anthony Black or even Jet Howard or anything significant when they know that this is really like a salary dump move for us. And this guy isn't going to be here in 2 months. So if we need to give up anything that we feel is significant, like if it was something, I don't even know if Gary Harris makes sense because he's an expiring as well. But if it was just anything of value, they were not going to move that. And it is interesting that was kind of, or seems to be the philosophy for them going into the trade deadline. Like, hey, let's trade for an expiring contract. It's like, well, what if you can get a guy who can contribute and be really impactful for this team that's on a multi-year deal, and you can kind of lock them up and have a little bit more security there? I found that interesting, but what did you think of that, and maybe some other things that you took from that interview?
Yeah, well, I found it interesting that he at least admitted to, like, yeah, I've asked myself that question, talking about, whether he would have made a trade on, at the deadline. I've asked myself that same question many times. I think he said something like that. So that was pretty open and honest of him to say that, because he could have very easily said, no, I don't look back on the past. We love the team we have, whatever one liner you want to throw in there. But to me, like, the biggest takeaway from that conversation was that was the first time in the Weltman era that I can think of where I heard those two words, win now, come out of his mouth. Like, that was a big, big deal to me to hear him say those things to Mike Bianchi.
In a positive light.
Yes, right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it definitely, like, that's a head-turning phrase. To hear him say that was like, whoa. And then to hear him address, like, I feel like so often, not just Jeff Weltman, but general managers, front office guys, they don't want to talk about what the team doesn't have or what the team needs for fear of making it sound like who they have now is not good enough, right? Like, you don't want to say things that can jeopardize the locker room or the chemistry or make it sound like you're putting down the team that you do have. Not to say that Jeff Weltman was putting down who we have, but he was pretty clear that what we're doing offensively is not good enough, right? And so to hear him say that, again, I was just like, oh my goodness, like, Jeff Weltman is not, again, he's not being totally candid. He's never going to do that. But it was some of the most unfiltered, not fully unfiltered, but slightly unfiltered stuff I'd ever heard from Jeff Weltman. And so that was pretty wild. But yeah, to hear him say win now, wow. Yeah, that was definitely got my attention.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. This is the most, like, open version of Jeff Weltman that we've got for sure in one of these interviews. And I do think he and Mike Bianchi have a good rapport, and he right. seems to open up more to Mike than he does some other outlets, and that's a credit to Mike for sure. But yeah, some of the quotes that I took from that were like turning page on the rebuild and looking through a win now lens, which he's mentioned like win now before, but usually like in a negative kind of sense.
That's
like
right.
we're not going to mortgage our future in order to win now. That's how he's mentioned it in the past. But this is like, hey, like, no, it's go time. And he even said, it's time to put our foot on the gas and go. Nothing can be off the table for us. Now, I don't know about nothing. There's a couple of guys that were 5-22 that I think everybody would assume are off the table. And there's, maybe 2 or 3 other guys that I would hope are off the table in discussions. And he also mentioned if we're going to get better offensively, it will come with some cost. Talking about the defense. And honestly, as much as I do like that my team's strength is more like, if you have to pick one, like I'm all for going in on defense. And if your offense is just good enough, I think that's kind of where I lean rather than the other way. How many really good offensive teams have we seen get blown out of the playoffs because they can't defend? So I would much rather build the way that this team has built. But even he is acknowledging that, hey, like we are going to have to get a little bit worse defensively to be able to add the offense. But you're second in the league in defensive efficiency. Like you have a good amount of wiggle room there that you can stand to sacrifice that to get better on the other side of the ball. And then the last thing that I had was the quote that he said that we're going to have to, quote unquote, swap rather than add, end quote. And that's really speaking to the financial and transactional status of where the team is right now. Because they're in the apron, the Magic cannot, you might not know this if you're listening, but the Magic actually cannot go out and sign significant players through free agency. They're going to have things like the veteran minimum and, the full mid-level exception, those kind of things that they can utilize to bring in free agents, but they can't go out and pay a guy. Let's say Trae Young was a free agent. The Magic cannot, like legally, they cannot go out and pay Trae Young $40 million a year. It's just not permissible underneath this current collective bargaining agreement. So if you're one of those people saying, the Magic don't spend money, the Magic don't do this, the Magic don't do that, the Magic are actually spending as much money as they are legally able to underneath the NBA and NBA Players Association collective bargaining agreement right now. So they are going to have to make these moves through trades rather than adding guys through the free agency pool.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, it limits like who's available, like when you talk about those numbers, like those are hard cap numbers that are set amounts basically, right? With the MLE mid-level exception or the veterans minimum, those kinds of things. So it definitely limits who you have or who's available to you. But again, that's the thing that's surprising to which, by the way, if you follow the NBA and you know the financial stuff, you understand that. But that's what makes that comment from Weltman so surprising. He's never even hinted at the idea of a suggestion of trading guys that are currently on the roster. He's never even come close to that. So to hear him say those things, like, yeah, it's going to come at a cost of us swapping guys. Again, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that he was saying those things. And honestly, again, because like many Magic fans, I feel like this roster needs some help. I was encouraged, honestly, to hear him say those things. And so glad to know that that's in their sights, at least for this summer.
And I would agree. I think both of us would agree with many Magic fans and other critics that it was unfortunate that the Magic didn't make any moves at the deadline. Right. But to those who get frustrated with the team or the front office and say, they don't care what we want, they don't listen to us, they don't know what Magic fans want. If you think that there wasn't an element of this that was made possible from them seeing the level of frustration from fans at the trade deadline, I would probably tend to disagree with that. But again, I thought Mike did a great job with Jeff, and I appreciate Jeff being so forthcoming in that interview. And then he went from that, and I guess we can jump into the exit interviews that were at the Advent Health Training Center with the rest of the Orlando media there. And we'll kind of go right back to Jeff Weltman. Always start with him, so we'll kind of go right back there. I have like 4 like really big points that I had from the Jeff Weltman availability there. He said, 1, they're looking to bring in proven offensive talent. So not a guy who might have the potential to be really good or they've scouted and maybe he'll be better in a bigger role. Like they don't want to take risks. They know what they need to do. They want to go out and get a guy that they know can do it and has done it in the past. But they want to make these moves without completely unraveling our DNA, which tells me people that are saying, oh, we need to trade for this guy, we need to trade for that guy, trading for a guy like Trae Young, for example, who, at this point, you're not being able to get a guy like that without trading like a Franz Wagner or a Jalen Suggs. Like, it would take one of those two guys, I'm pretty confident, to make a move like that. And for me, trading that much defense for offense and losing that much defense to get that offense is not what they're looking for. It would just alter what this team does too much. And I'm actually a fan of that, whether it's Trae Young or if it's, I mean, let's not be silly. If it was Luka Doncic, it would be a different conversation. But if you're going out and getting one of these guys who is a complete turnstile defensively, it's not really what this team is looking for. But Kevin, we just mentioned the squeeze quote because he was asked by Jason Beatty. He said, you had mentioned at the trade deadline that you felt like teams were going to squeeze you. He's like, would you kind of change your mind? And Jeff, he did backpedal on that quote just a little bit. And he said, maybe I misspoke. And he said, everybody squeezes everybody, which to our credit was our point at the trade deadline when he said that. And maybe he did misspeak, or maybe that's not really what he meant to say.
Or maybe he listens to the show and, I'm just kidding.
I don't know about that. But our point was, that's kind of the point. Yeah. Like, you're trying to get the best value that you can in trades. So that was pretty interesting. And then the last thing that I had is he said, I hope we did the right thing talking about the deadline. And you brought it up. There is that little bit of doubt that has crept into their mind that, hey, maybe it wasn't the right move, but you could look at that two different ways of like, this guy all of a sudden now isn't sure of what he's doing, or he's human and can realize maybe when he's made a mistake or hasn't done everything perfect and is willing to adapt and change his mind about things, which to me, I appreciate. So to me, those were like the biggest quotes from that. Everything else, like, we essentially already got from the Bianchi interview.
Yeah, I definitely think so. But yeah, like you said, it's pretty rare to hear not just basketball, but in life, you get people who are in positions of authority and leadership and quote unquote power within whatever organization or company. Like, it's very rare to hear them express full on like remorse or regret for something. And not that we got that from Jeff Weltman, but he at least didn't just shut it down. He was at least open to the idea that maybe we should have made a deal. But again, regardless, I think it does, not making a deal, if there's a silver lining, once again opened up the possibilities of what this team could do. And when we saw what this team could or could not do, it just confirms what has to be done this summer. And so if there's a silver lining, I think there's that. All right, Jonathan, it's bittersweet time. It's time for our final Jam Hot Chicken Jam of the week for the 2024-25 season. And this one is not really Jam of the Week, but a Jam of the Series. Just like last year, we decided to take the whole playoff series and find the best jam that we thought was the best jam for the 2024-25 first round against the Boston Celtics. And for us, it was unanimous, 2 votes to game 2. Second quarter, about 9:40 to go in this one. It's Paolo Banchero, gets the inbounds pass from Gary Harris, has Drew Holiday, backs him down, turns to his right, and throws it down with 2 hands on Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps Porzingis is like 7'13" or something like that. He's huge. And Paolo didn't care. Just dunked right on him. It was great. Unfortunately, that wasn't a loss. So we'll take that L, I guess. But Paolo gets the W for that dunk. It was a lot of fun. Also a lot of fun is visiting our friends at Jam Hot Chicken, who are proudly serving the city beautiful, bringing jams, culture, and hot chicken to the heart of Winter Park. You can find them at 400 West New England Avenue, Suite 13 in Hannibal Square. You can also find them online on social media at Jam Hot Chicken and also jamhotchickenfl.com, where you can check out their menu and all things Jam Hot. We're big fans of Jam Hot because they're big fans of the Orlando Magic and of our awesome Orlando Magic fan community. And so again, whenever you're in Winter Park and you're hungry, go check them out and definitely let them know that the Six Man Show sent you.
This episode is also brought to you by Can Dugan, Dalek Lopez, Chansu, Austin Vogt, Duval Pauly, and R Improv 221. These are some of our Hall of Fame and Elite Tier patrons, folks who help support the Six Man Show all season long. Some of those for years now, helping us do everything that we do. We literally couldn't afford to keep the lights on and really do all the things that we do without the support of our patrons. And we give special shout out to brand new patrons whenever we have them. That's Can Dugan. Ken Dugan recently joined the Patreon. So welcome, first of all, and thank you so much for your support. So whether you just found us the last few weeks as you're listening to our playoff coverage, or you've been listening to the show for a little bit or a long time even, if you want to help support what we do, and the more support that we have, we're able to do even more Magic coverage, right? Like Kevin and I, we're not shy about the fact that it's our dream to be able to do this full time. If we were able to do this full time, maybe we could have been at the exit interviews, asking questions that Magic fans want to hear, and we'd be able to cover more games and get questions asked and answered throughout the year of things that Magic fans want to do. And overall, just do an even better job of covering this team and bringing you all more Magic content. If you're like myself, you're like Kevin, a few years ago before we started the pod, we didn't have many friends or Magic fans to talk to about the Orlando Magic. And due to, in large part, the support of our patrons, we're able to share that now with thousands of Magic fans across the globe. And we don't want to reveal too much, but we're actually working on something this summer to help literally bring Magic fans together all across the globe. So be on the lookout for that. But hey, if you like what we're doing, or maybe you just, I don't know, you're listening to this randomly and you want to be a good Samaritan and pass some goodwill along, you want to help support our show, head on over to patreon.com/the6man show. You can help support us for as little as $2 a month. That's like half of like a McDonald's 4-piece nugget these days. Shout out to the economy. But doesn't cost much to help support us do what we're doing. And hey, if everybody that listened to our show gave $2 a month, like, we probably could be pretty close to doing this full time. So, but hey, even if you don't want to, we appreciate you listening. We appreciate your support all season long. Again, you want to jump over to Patreon, help support the boys, head on over to patreon.com/the6man show. Every little bit helps, whether you're Hall of Fame, rookie, elite tier, all-star, whatever it is. We appreciate everybody so much for the support again all year long. And now that's enough for me. Why do you say we get back to the episode? Next, we'll talk about Jamal Mosley for a minute here. One thing that I think is like an underrated skill of Jamal that maybe he's learned quite a bit from Jeff Weltman is sometimes his ability to talk a lot and not say much. And I feel like that is really by design, doesn't want to show his cards. But when asked about, what are your big takeaways from the season, again, Jamal Mosley and everybody shared the sentiment that like the team didn't give up. They stuck together. They finished the season strong. But the biggest thing for me in the questions from Jamal Mosley, and I do forget who asked the question, but essentially, would he look to bring in someone to the coaching staff to maybe help with the offense? And when he said, like, in terms of like moving to a win now type of lens, we're going to leave no stone unturned. So the fact that he can't just come out and say, yes, the coaching staff that I have is not good enough, we need to bring somebody else in. He's not going to say that. But the fact that he seems open to that is really encouraging, because like since the loss of Nate Tibbetts last season, to the WNBA, a lot of Magic fans have been asking like, hey, like you need to bring in a more like offensive minded, like, lead assistant or very experienced assistant to add to the coaching staff. And I do think that is one of the things that we probably do need to do this year. Or I know there are some, brighter, younger minds that are maybe towards the end of the bench or behind the bench, giving them more of an opportunity and giving them more responsibility. Like whichever way that can come, whether it's internal growth and internal promotion that way, or bringing somebody else in, I do want to see more complexity and some, better results for things like after timeouts and, side out of bounds and all those kind of things next year, and just more organization in general offensively and just more variety. So hopefully we get to see that in one way or another. Was there anything else that you had from Jamal?
Yeah, I had one other thing from Mosley. When I can't remember who asked this question, it might have been Mason, who brought up what Jeff Weltman said.
I completely forgot to do this. Mason, no longer with SI, just really sucks. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah,
wish him the best. He came on our show, was awesome in the handful of times we got to meet him this year. Absolutely did a home run of a job all season long for Magic fans and for SI. And unfortunately, we don't know the specifics on what happened over there, but those parties are no longer working together, at least covering the Magic. And totally 100% sucks.
It's an L, big time.
You know
for
what?
Mason and for us, yeah.
We didn't bring this up at the beginning of the show, and that's 100% on us. Fazan. We didn't. He's going to listen to this. He's going to get to this point. Like, I can't believe these idiots haven't touched on this at all just yet. But Fazan, if you guys follow us on social media, if you're on, Magic Twitter especially, or you read our articles, Fazan has been covering the Magic for us for almost 3.5 years now, I believe it is. And he is a graduate from the University of North Texas and has been on staff there as, I believe, a video analyst and coordinator for them. And he's done a great job for us, great job covering the Magic. And he's decided that he just needs to focus on, his real actual basketball job moving forward. So he won't be covering the Magic for us any longer, which is sad for us. But Kevin and I have had the conversation for like the last 2.5 years that we know eventually this day was going to come when Fazan was like, hey, I don't really need to do this anymore, because he's wanted to pursue a career in basketball. So really sucks for us, really sucks for Magic fans, but we're just really thankful and appreciative of Fazan and everything that he did. And just was on top of everything covering the Magic. If there was an interview or a podcast or an article or anything, he was always on top of it, aggregating his butt off for sure. But yeah, just wanted to say a couple of quick words about Mason and our guy Fazan, who totally on me, forgot to bring that up at the top of the pod, but he'll be missed and he'll obviously still keep in touch, but I'm going to miss everything that he did for us for sure.
Yeah. Works very, very hard. Maybe one of the hardest working guys, we've been around. So shout out to Fazan. But yeah, he's also going to be on an NBA bench someday. Not as a player, 100%. But as a coach, like 100%. So that'll be fun.
Definitely not as a player. Dude definitely not cannot play ball a lick.
Nope.
But will definitely, I will be shocked if he never ends up on an NBA bench somewhere.
He's that good. Okay. We were talking about Mosley, right? Okay, as I was saying, I think it was Mason who mentioned this. He brought up Jeff Weltman saying potentially swapping some defense to upgrade the offense. And before he could even finish the question, again, I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it was Mason though.
No, I don't know about who, but yeah.
Yeah, but before he could finish the question, he said, Weltman's talked about blah, 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 blah. How do you feel about, and before he could even say the end of the sentence, Jamal said, yes. Like, again, whoa. Like, that's, again, telling. Some more candid, very telling.
Get these guys the heck out of here. They suck.
Give me some offense. Nobody can shoot the ball. But yeah, that was pretty wild. So that was the only other thing I took from that. But yeah, pretty much everybody just wants offense. That's what we want.
Like, I can, and because I'm going to use this guy as an example because I think he would have like the most animated reaction to that. I can picture Cole Anthony sitting in the locker room after the exit interviews, watching that and hearing that, be like, damn, Mose, for real, it's like that? Like,
yep.
Yeah, that was probably the single funniest moment of the entire exit interviews. Is like, oh, you want to bring in some more? He's like, yes, absolutely, yes, 100 times, yes. Yeah, that was really good. Okay, let's move on to probably my single most favorite moment in the exit interviews. We'll talk about Paolo Banchero, and just kind of talking about his time in Orlando, and kind of alluding to his extension that's coming up. His quote was, "I love it here. Couldn't be more happy to be part of the Orlando Magic, so I look forward to spending a lot more years here." And an entire fan base just took a long, collective sigh of relief.
Yeah.
You don't say something like that if you're not looking to agree to a maximum extension the second that the NBA Finals have concluded. So for all the, oh my gosh, is he going to leave, all this trauma that we have, and we're so scarred, and we need to build around this guy. I can't believe we didn't do anything at the deadline. He's not going to sign the extension. I think we can all confidently sleep well tonight knowing that that is not going to be an issue, at least this summer.
Yes, but again, you talk about trauma. I'm not sleeping until there is pen to paper, brother. Sure. No, abso-freaking-lutely not. No, I mean, honestly, obviously, he's going to sign it, just to get the money at the very least. It's 2025. Players sign contracts and then they ask to be traded. But no, just kidding. It's not on my radar at all. But, it will be very nice to see that Shams tweet, the day after the finals ends, that Paolo's agreed to a max extension or whatever. So that'll be fun. But yeah, it is always nice to hear those words, And yeah, obviously, we agree with you, Paolo. We hope you're here for many, 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 many years to come.
I think the exact question was like, what is your connection to the city of Orlando? And he started talking about how his first 2 years he lived downtown and he never really left downtown. But now I'm assuming he's moved out to one of the more affluent areas in Windermere.
Have you seen his house?
Something like that. I don't know like suburban Orlando that well, so I can't speak to exactly what pocket of Orlando he's moved to. I'm sure there's people that know that. I'm not privy to that type of information. But now that he's moved out to a beautiful house and more like, I'm sure, a style of living that he's more accustomed to, and that just kind of seems to be the theme with everybody. Like, you spend a few years here in Orlando, then you buy a house here and you're here for the rest of your life.
Yep.
That's just kind of the way that it goes. And he mentioned that he loves the city. He loves spending time here. His family loves spending time here. So I finished that video, and you know what I said? Bring back the Sonics. I don't even care. Like, bring him back. He's not going anywhere. Now this could age very poorly in the future, right? But like, him saying, I want to spend a lot more years here, put a freaking team around him, keep this team competitive for the next 12 years, and he won't go anywhere. And we don't have anything to worry about. So just everybody do your freaking job, and everything will be totally 100% completely fine.
I hope so.
Yeah. Another quote when they were talking about, kind of the playoff series and just kind of the way that the Magic have evolved. This was a bar. He said, we aren't trying to be the Celtics. We're trying to be the Magic and the best version of our team.
Yeah.
Which I love. Like, hey, we're not trying to recreate what they're doing. Like, I'm not Jason Tatum. I'm Paolo Banchero.
Yep.
Franz isn't Jaylen Brown. He's Franz Wagner. And we're going to do things our own way and kind of, pave our own path. And that was really dope. And then last, he said that he was excited to hear about the team wanting to win now. And all the players, when they were asked about that, they said, well, as players, like, we always want to win now. But hearing that that's the whole organizational shift in mindset towards win now, that's what Paolo Banchero has been waiting for. He's shown since day one that he's ready to win now. But unfortunately, all the things that this organization has had invested in other players and other draft capital, they've had to be a bit more patient than they probably would have liked. I'm sure once they got Paolo, if it was feasible to just go right into win now, they would have loved that. But it has really just very recently revealed itself in the past 6 months or so what is 100% necessary and what we do have and what we don't have.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, to hear him say that, and again, it was very, you said this earlier, it was very interesting when that win now question was brought up. Certain echelon of players got different reactions, right? Like, listen, the upper echelon, the Paolo, Paolo's reaction was like, bro, bring it on, let's go, right? Not
Wendell
exactly, but if you
was
read
like,
between the lines.
Can you ask the question again?
Right, yeah.
Wendell was like, he did not look super thrilled to be talking about it. I could just be totally reading too much into it, and it could be very much on me. But that's what I got from it. They're like, oh, you're ready to win now? And he's like, what does that look like? He's like, can you ask that question again? And then he kind of he's like, well, win now means winning games. It's like, right. Well, duh.
I don't think he fully understood that he was asking about that Jeff Weltman had said that. I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding there. But yes, regardless, Paolo obviously knows he's not included in any kind of swaps or whatever. He's like, yeah, let's go. Give me some
of these guys out of here.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know about that, but anyway, that was pretty fun, and yeah, it felt like his eyes lit up a little bit when that question was asked.
Yeah. Anything else before we move on to Franz?
Let's go to Franz.
Okay. Every guy was asked. Philip Rossman-Reich asked a lot of the guys if they thought that at some point the shooting struggles became mental, and Franz said that he absolutely agreed with that. Which we kind of all know with Franz. Like, we talked about this a couple episodes ago, where in shoot-arounds and practice, the shooting motion looks really fluid, and then in games, the hitch gets very much exaggerated, with really can only be a mental thing at this point. So no surprise there. But to me, the probably the biggest thing that I took away from the Franz Wagner availability was he's unsure or undecided at this point and whether or not he'll play Eurobasket this year. Eurobasket, being, I think, like towards the end of the summer, like August, September-ish kind of range. The fact that he's non-committal at this point, as much as I love watching Germany and love watching them compete, one, he probably realizes that their odds are going to be a little bit tougher this go around. No Mo, obviously. He'll still be recovering from the ACL at that point. But I want so badly for Franz, at least for this summer, to prioritize the Magic over the German national team and prioritize his commitment to the Magic over his commitment to the national team and just get healthy and work on his individual game and his own skills for the entire summer. To me, that outside of guys getting healthy in like a massive trade, that would probably be the third biggest thing that could happen for the Magic this offseason is Franz Wagner making 500 threes a day for the next 6 months and coming back and at least being a league average 3-point shooter. I heard that and I genuinely could not believe that he's even considering not playing for Germany in Eurobasket. But at this point, like I guess they got the bronze at the last Eurobasket and then won the FIBA World Cup. Like, he's already got a gold medal. He's going to have a lot of Eurobaskets, a lot of World Cups, a lot of Olympics to play in. You have a very finite window when it comes to the NBA. And I would just love for him to say, you know what, just this summer, like next summer, are they playing the World Cup next summer? I think there's a year that they won't be playing international competition. But like, just one summer, just say, you know what, I'm all about getting better for the Magic this offseason. I would really welcome that.
Yeah. First off, Eurobasket is August 27th through September 14th. So you're right. It's like that gets, which by the way, they always have warm-up games and stuff before that. So you're talking early August all the way through mid-September, and then you turn right around and boom, you're in media day, you're in training camp, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
you got 3 weeks off.
Exactly, yeah. And so I know he said it. That's another thing. I'll believe it when I see it, man.
Yeah,
like
totally fair.
When that time comes, like I still expect him to play for Germany. I'd be very surprised if he didn't. Not just like some people may say, "Oh, Mo's not playing. Maybe he won't want to play." That might be even more of a reason for him to want to play because he knows his country really is going to need some help, and he might try to bring that. So I would be surprised. It would, like you as a Magic fan, I would welcome it. I think it'd be great. But I would be very, very surprised if that happens. But yeah, that's
I would argue out of the 3 kind of international cycles, that's probably the least important, Eurobasket, World Cup.
Sure.
So there was one to miss, it'll be that one. And Franz figures out the 3-point shot long term. That also changes the long-term outlook for the German national team.
Right.
If he starts, with the closer 3-point line in the international competition, he starts shooting 38, 40% from 3 in those international competitions, and they have Mo, and if they're able to get a guy like Hartenstein and add Tristan da Silva, like Germany is going to be really good for a long time. So, and also there's going to be turnover. Like, what's his name? Gordon Herbert, was he the national? He's not coaching the German national team, so there's going to be a lot of turnover there. So who knows? I will be surprised if he doesn't play, but like last year, like previous years, there's been even no mention or possibility that he wouldn't.
That's right.
So just the fact that he's considering, I think, is pretty big.
Yeah.
And then the last, not really a big point, but something that I found funny was they were talking about Paolo's negotiations, and he's mentioned how much he's happy to play alongside Paolo, and he said that his negotiations this summer, quote unquote, shouldn't be too stressful, in a very cheeky, joking manner, because we all expect almost midnight, the night of the finals ends, to get that Shams notification that the Magic and Paolo have agreed to terms on a max, rookie, contract extension.
Yeah. Well, when someone slides you a piece of paper that says, "Hey, the total amount, like the maximum amount you're allowed to make for your role. Hey, we're offering that to you." You just sign it. And you move on. So
you figure out everything else later. Like,
that's right.
It doesn't. Everything else is kind of irrelevant at that point.
I should also add, you sign it when it's 9 figures or whatever that number, 270 million or whatever it is, right? You just sign it and you figure it out later. I agree.
Yeah. All right, we got to hear from Jalen Suggs as well, and he was asked, I think it was by Josh Robbins. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing the question here, but would he consider like changing the way that he plays to, hopefully ward off future injuries? And Jalen's quote unquote said, "I ain't changing a damn thing." But that was a direct quote from Jalen Suggs. He said, "I'll be honest with you, I'm not changing the way that he plays," which I was really encouraged to hear. And then he also added that he expects to be ready for next season, which is good because for me, there was a little bit of uncertainty when we got that news a couple of weeks ago that the expectation is that they'll be ready for next season, which isn't like, hey, they definitely will be, but like kind of maybe we're kind of hoping for that. To hear him say that he expects to be back for next season was great to hear. He's working on a lot of like upper body strength, strengthen the rest of his body, bulk up a little bit. And then when he's kind of given the green light, full go to get back in shape, and he said that usually that kind of stuff happens pretty easy for him to cut back down and wait to get back to his playing condition. But then he was asked about the team shifting towards a win now approach, and to me, he had the most interesting and sort of nuanced answer of the day, where he, again, paraphrasing here, I don't have the whole quote, and you guys, if you want the whole quote, you can go and watch the exit interview. But he said that he loves all the guys that they play with, but at the end of the day, what he's really interested in is winning. He said, "I'm really, really interested in winning." And he said kind of his hard-headed mentality is that they can win with the people that they have now if they just do things the right way, because he really believes in that group and he really loves that group. But even these guys acknowledging that, yeah, it's really important to us that we like the guys that we play with and this brotherhood that we've grown and this culture that we've helped create here. At the end of the day, what we really, really, really want is winning. And for the locker room to say that, we can all say that on the outside. That's easy to watch these games and to have a little bit of insight, but not really in the day-to-day of those relationships and friendships. And like Wendell later on was talking about, even if this team comes back and it's not the same, this particular group, I think we're always going to be in touch. We're going to be at each other's weddings and things like that. For all of that kind of stuff to be true, and for them to be able to look around the locker room and be like, "Hey, I love you guys, but you know what I really love is winning basketball." And that's what we've been saying. We love that these guys get along. We love the vibes and the social media videos and the post-game interviews and all that kind of stuff. But that stuff kind of gets old if you're not winning. And for these guys to acknowledge that, and really the organization is acknowledging that at this point, has me really excited for the future and tells me that we do have the right guys here, that even they can acknowledge like, hey, we all want to be here. We love being here. But at the end of the day, it's about winning. And the fact that they understand that. And I just thought Jalen gave the most perfect answer about that of the entire day.
Yeah, you said it exactly. Like we've talked many times about, how the vibes are great in the locker room. And, we've had players on, we've had Jamal on, and everybody said it, vibes are great. Team gets along great. The power of friendship only gets you so far. We joked about that, in December when we were missing half the team or whatever, and we're still finding ways to win games. That Cinderella story can only take you but so far. And obviously, that Cinderella story feels like it came to an end with the end of this season. And so, but you're right, like to hear, Jalen mention that. And obviously it's hard. It's hard when we talk about these things or when we hear other people talk about these things. Like, I think we Magic fans have certain players in mind, like when they're talking about whether it's trading defense for offense or just getting better offensively or whatever. It makes me wonder if the players themselves also have guys in mind. And I'm sure none of it is personal, right? Or maybe obviously behind closed doors, who knows? Maybe some guys don't like each other. I'm sure that's normal. Any workplace, right? You got people you like, people you don't like. But it makes you wonder if some of those guys are like, yeah, I hope this player is included in a deal, or it's always so interesting to me especially because I don't know about your line of work, Jonathan, but in my line of work, we don't necessarily like just swap employees for other companies. Like there's no trading and stuff. So I can't imagine what that is like. Like, hey, I hope my boss trades this guy for someone else. Like that's weird. But yeah, it makes me wonder if those guys have specific people in mind or if they're just like, I just want to win,
I think it's probably, I almost guarantee it's very different because when you're growing up and you're a fan of the NBA, you just know it's part of the business.
Right.
So you have like 15, 16 years of like conscious memory of how the NBA works before you get to that point. So if our bosses tomorrow were like, hey, you guys are all on the trading block now, that's a thing now, it would be pretty jarring. And
they've all been traded on 2K before. We'll put it that way.
Oh, 100%. I've traded every single one of these guys. Even like Paolo Banchero, when he gets into age 41 season and he's making $60 million a year, and I'm trying to rebuild the Magic at that point. Yes, absolutely.
How dare you? What is the loyalty?
Absolutely. What do you do at that point? You just stop the franchise mode?
No, dude, if he's there that long, he's won me championships. He's staying for life. He's a Dirk Nowitzki. He's staying for life.
When he's taking up like 80% of the salary cap, that's when I'm like, all right, we got to start making some moves here.
No, I don't mean that we trade them. I'm saying, if they play their my player or whatever, right? Like trades happen on there too. Like they've requested a trade on there, So you're right. It is more part of the culture, with the NBA. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to think about.
And you brought up like the power of friendship only gets you so far. I think we have enough evidence to say the power of friendship gets you to the first round, and that's it. That's kind of where we are at this point. So, but yeah, I thought that was awesome. Jalen Suggs probably gave the best quote of the day. Maybe the best overall interview of the day was Jonathan Isaac, and answered some questions. And as forthcoming as Jeff Weltman was, Jonathan Isaac might have one-upped him in the exit interviews. And he was asked about the way that he felt he played this year. And he said, honestly, I don't feel that I played that well, and said that he regretted putting on the weight last summer where he went from, 230 all the way up to 250. And then he mentioned that it was a collective decision, that it was he and the team both agreed that him playing at the 5, adding the weight was probably a good idea. And that he said, it doesn't work with the way that I play, especially with the way that I defend. I think it was a misstep. That's a big thing to say, but to his credit, he mentioned that he and the team agreed on this. And he said really with his mental makeup and the way that he tries to play the game, the weight really got in the way. And he started to play a little bit better as the year went on, as we kind of all said that. He said his personal positive was playing in 75 games. And then he also agreed with Philip Rossman-Reich's question that the shooting was mental for both him and the team. So he said he is going to look to get down to around like 230, back to where he was playing before. He said he started the season at 250, ended the season about 235. And to me, this is just the most reasonable and logical explanation for why Jonathan Isaac had such a down year. We can all point to the shooting. We can point to the shooting of basically the entire team. So I don't feel that it's right to hold that against any one player in particularly, because it does seem like at some point there was just something in the water. And, playing organized basketball growing up, when your teammates start to hit shots and your team is playing well, you're more confident and willing to take shots because at that point it's really not that consequential if you make it or miss it. So you're less tense and you're ready to just kind of pull the trigger there. And that issue mentally really seemed to seep into the entire team's mindset and confidence issue. So I don't want to hang up so much about the shooting. But that being said, with the drop off in salary going into next year, he's not making $25 million. I think it's $15 million starting next year. If he is able to get back to that level of defender that he was in previous years, he played in 75 games this year, not as many minutes, obviously, but this kind of, I was leaning in my mind towards like, okay, guys that we would be willing to trade or keep. And I think everybody outside of 3 or 4 guys I have available, like if there's a good enough offer, but just my gut feeling in terms of like, should we move this guy? Should we not move this guy? If you're looking to trade defense for offense, if you can bring like that level of JI back, you're able to bundle a lot more defense together and send that out for like an offensive guy if you still have guys like Franz, Jalen, and JI on this team. So I don't know if that changed your mind about JI at all. We haven't even really talked, whether you felt one way or the other with bringing JI back next year. But to me, this was like, yeah, that makes sense with what we've seen this year.
Right. For me, not being a professional athlete and not being a 7-footer, I just wonder how possible it is to recapture that. Like, you put on the weight, You do it for a whole year. Like, is it just that simple? Is it just get the weight off this summer and then boom, you're back to old Jonathan Isaac, or is it not?
Fair question.
That's the only question I have with this. Obviously, I hope that's the case. I hope he can shed the pounds and lock back into how he used to play, because obviously, athleticism was a huge part of his defensive prowess, if you will, right? But yeah, I don't know. That's a very big question mark for me this summer. Like you said, if that version of Jonathan Isaac is available this summer, it's hard to deal him, especially if he can be consistent at the corner 3 again. But outside of that, wouldn't be surprised to see him potentially as one of those guys that gets swapped for more offensive players.
And if we're strictly talking about like guys that have the most value, like, yeah, next year it goes down to 15 million. If you can convince a team that that's the Jonathan Isaac that they're getting for $15 million a year, that is a guy who would be a significant trade piece in my opinion. So if it was me, I'm leaning towards keeping him, and I would be willing to roll the dice that you are getting that guy back. And not just saying that on blind faith, like towards the end of the year, we did see J.I. start to get closer to that level. And regardless, again, I don't pretend to understand like a lot of the advanced defensive metrics, but most of the advanced defensive impact metrics out there still had J.I. as one of the most impactful defenders in the league, even though he didn't really meet the standard that we're all accustomed to. So the impact is still there. If he can drop the weight, and it is a fair question, like once you put on that amount of weight and you lose a lot of that agility, is it possible to get that back? I don't really know. I'm sure hoping that it is. And if it is, I'm willing to roll the dice and keep him and see what he's got for another year there. Yeah. We got a quick kind of update from Mo Wagner. Wasn't, very long, obviously isn't going to have a ton to say, but was asked about the rehab and he said, it's going well. I'm feeling really good. And then when asked about being ready for next season, he said, that's what I'm working towards. And then another thing that I just love these Wagners. I love their family dynamic. And he was asked to like evaluate Franz this season. And he says, I don't evaluate his play. He's like, I'm his brother and I'm his teammate. I try to separate the two. And he said, essentially, I couldn't care less how Franz plays. Like, I care about the person. He's my best friend. Playing with him has been amazing. It's been awesome for our family and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, good to hear that Mo Wagner feels well and hopefully he's ready for the start of next season.
Yeah, we'll see. I was doing the math when he was talking. If he had the ACL in December, that puts you right on the line, right? Typically, they say 9 in the NBA. It's 9-ish months, which would be September. So, we'll see. We'll see if he's able to get back by then and then get ramped up and ready for the season to tip off in late October.
Kevin, this is kind of a paradox with the Orlando Magic. Shifting to the win now mentality, do we see the Magic approach injuries differently moving forward? Not saying they're going to bring a guy back too early, but are they going to go the complete opposite side of the spectrum, which they have before, is like, we're going to bring you back at like the last possible moment.
Mm-hmm. Not with the ACL in this situation, but you're saying in general, yeah. I mean, it's possible. Maybe a slight move towards more aggressive instead of conservative, but I would be surprised if we're rushing guys back at this, because again, we're talking about win now, but there's different levels of win now, if you ask me, right? Like, we're still, again, a couple years away from their primes, Franz and Paolo. At that point, yeah, we're throwing guys out there with broken arms and, in the playoffs, whatever. I don't care. Like, we're doing hockey
getting
style.
The hockey treatment. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, for now, maybe a little bit more aggressive, but I don't think it'd be anything crazy.
Yeah. And then the next one was another short one, kind of surprisingly. It was Cole Anthony. The biggest quote that I took away was, we all got to mature a little bit, learn to stay focused. And he went on to say, mainly a message for me, but the team too. And he mentioned multiple times the team needing to stay locked in and focused. And there were a few guys that alluded to that, just like staying locked in throughout the year, staying mentally tough, staying focused. I think KCP mentioned that as well. Did that stand out to you, or was there anything else that Cole mentioned that you kind of took away?
I I wouldn't say it stood out to me. Honestly, it sounded a little bit more. I don't want to say BS, but I mean, just it was a pretty just typical answer if you ask me. Like, I didn't read too much into it. Yeah, I don't know, man. The whole Cole thing is like when I asked the question earlier, like, we think of certain players, right? Like, does Cole even see himself in some of these conversations? Like when they're asking him about when now, or when he's hearing Jeff Weltman, or like, I wonder if Cole realizes that some of these conversations are about him, right? Like,
or could be about him.
Right. That's a better way to put it. Yeah, could be. You're right. Could be about him. But I wonder if Cole feels like he's so far removed, or if because he's said he's known he didn't play well this season or last season. I wonder if those thoughts or ideas have crept into his mind that, crap, I was supposed to play for my Orlando Magic career at least last year, and maybe I didn't do a good enough job. And so I wonder if any of that is on his radar, or if he thinks he's as the heart and one of the guys at the heart and soul of the team, if he feels like he's still safe. Does that make sense? Like, I just wonder if he thinks that way.
I think BS might be just a little bit harsh, but I think this, for me, it was revealing that, like, sure, this team, everybody likes each other, and they like playing for one another, and they root for each other, all that kind of stuff. But we kind of all felt that the vibes were very much off in January and February. And I think this is like a slight glimpse into the mindset of that time, that he felt that some guys weren't handling it very maturely and weren't really staying locked in and focused during that time. I think Jet Howard, later, he mentioned like things like he learned this year, like what to do and what not to do in terms of like preparation and mental and team aspects. So I wonder what he thought. Was it his own personal preparation? Was it, other players, or the team's preparation in general? I'm not really sure, but hearing a few guys talk about like having to stay mentally tough and having to stay locked in, it doesn't totally surprise me, because it did feel like there were just like a lot of mental lapses as we were going through that losing streak in January, in February. And yeah, I am curious about really all of these guys. Like, what do they think about their future here in Orlando when they hear like win now, and knowing that trades are going to have to happen? They're not going to go out and add guys. I guess the next guy that we can go to is like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And even he was asked about knowing like where he'll be next season, and how does it feel to, hey, know where you're going to play. And he was kind of like, if I'm reading like behind the eyes, he's like, I don't know for 100% that I am going to be here next year. So I think everybody knows that there's like guys with two lockers, like kind of, towards the front of the locker room, that those guys probably aren't going anywhere. And the rest of everybody, it's some guys, there may be more chance that they're going than others, but there's like a non-zero chance that every guy on this roster, probably outside of Paolo and Franz, could be traded. And I think that does have to be kind of in the back of everyone's mind this summer. Like, at any time you could be out with your family on a boat somewhere, having a party, at the movies, wherever, and you could get that bzz, 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 bzz from your agent in your pocket. Hey, you're going to Memphis, or you're going wherever, right? Like, I think this is going to be a little bit of a stressful summer for a lot of these guys who have been here and who want to be able to see this thing out, but may have not played well enough to cement themselves being here next year.
Right.
So I think, that's got to be in all of their minds at this point.
Yeah. Which, by the way, you and I talked about this. The possibility for a trade starts as soon as the season is over for the Magic. So like right now, the Magic can make trades with teams that are not currently still in the playoffs, which is crazy, right? That the NBA, you can do trades while other teams are playing the playoffs, which is kind of crazy, but it's possible. Like, it's possible.
We don't
at any moment
ever see that happen, because then you're closing yourself off from like dealing with, all the other teams that are still playing. But the fact that like it's possible even right now is crazy to think about.
Yeah. Anytime between now and next February, it's possible between now and the next trade deadline, which is crazy. But yeah, it's valid. Like, it feels that way. I'm sure nerve wracking for them. I don't want to say nerve-wracking for us fans, but it definitely is exciting, but also there's a little bit of anxiety there, right? Like there's a lot on the line. A lot can go right, a lot can go wrong. And it's just, it's a lot of unknowns that are going to happen between now and October, pretty much.
I don't really know how they're going to deal with it, because I know you and I, basically starting the day after the finals, I'm going to be on edge every day.
Yeah.
First, it's going to be waiting for the Paolo extension to come through. Yeah. And then it's just going to be waiting for a trade, because it could literally happen at any time. Like, yep. Luka Doncic got traded at like 11:30 on a Friday or Saturday night, whatever that was. Yep. That has shown us that anything is possible.
Or even fast forward to the opposite end of it. James Harden was traded like the week of training camp or something crazy like that, right? So like, it's literally possible at any point between June to, again, even into the trade deadline. So yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that goes.
And it's not like years past where we approach free agency and we're like, hey, the Magic might do something. They might not do anything at all. We know they're going to do something, and they're going to do, probably multiple somethings this offseason. Yeah. And they're going to be significant. Back to KCP, he was talked about some of his offensive struggles this year, and he didn't exactly come out and say it, but I had felt that he was alluding to not getting the looks that he's used to, like in the flow of the offense. And he said he didn't really have an issue fitting in with the team, but he said there was an adjustment in trying to figure out his teammates and kind of finding where those looks were going to come from, and trying to get into the rhythm. That his approach to this summer is going to be to get in the gym, obviously knock down a lot of shots. And his biggest takeaway was the ability to see that they could stay mentally strong and together throughout the season. And then again, he was asked about, how does it feel to know where you're going to be? And he kind of like stumbled through the answer for that a little bit, and just kind of, my very novice level of body language. It was like, hey, I don't know if I'm actually going to be here next off season. So
yeah, that was very interesting.
Kevin's
I know
eyes
you're not a
just
hockey
got
guy,
really
bro,
wide.
but
What's going on?
I just gotta say, bro, Winnipeg just tied Game 7 with 1.6 seconds left in the third period. That is the craziest thing I have ever seen.
Holy smokes.
That is
I am
unreal.
a hockey guy, but now that the Lightning are out, I totally don't care.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. Okay, back to the Magic. I love the Magic so much. Here we go. Let's go back to these exit interviews. Who's left? Like, we got like 5 guys left.
We've got most of the team left still. Anything that you took from KCP?
No, that was the one. Like, that whole idea of, being there or not being there, that was it for me.
Okay. Wendell, he talked about playing through injuries that nobody really knew about, which is always funny to hear, because it's like, well, if you're hurt, isn't that supposed to be on the injury report? And Wendell just wasn't really on the injury report for most of, the end of the season. So it's like, how much are they really sharing on those things was one thing. He mentioned that the shooting for himself, the entire team was mental. Common thread, really outside of like the win now and like proud of the team for fighting through the adversity they faced. The shooting being a mental issue was one of the more common themes throughout the exit interviews. And then we talked about kind of his weirdish reaction to the win now question, where it didn't really seem like he was sure what the question was, asked to have the question stated again, and then kind of went through it and said, well, what do I think about the team shifting to a win now approach? And he's like, well, that just, means we got to start winning games. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what it means. But maybe he didn't understand that the question was more about like what's going to happen with the roster, with the team kind of approaching that, which I believe was the nature of the question. But yeah, maybe like you said, maybe it was the first time he was hearing that, or maybe he hadn't really put too much thought into that, but was for sure an interesting reaction or answer to that question.
Well, yeah, I took it again because the question was asked and maybe he just zoned out or didn't hear it or whatever. And then when it was repeated, I don't remember it being repeated as, Jeff talked about win now. It was like, what does that phrase mean to you? Win now. And so if he didn't put the 2 and 2 together, like Jeff said this or whatever, that's how I took it. Again, it's, it's who knows, right? But I didn't read too much into it.
They have the one-on-one interviews with these guys before they meet with the media. It always seems like there are like specific talking points whether it be at Media Day or the exit interviews. And Jeff Weltman in the interview, I think it was with Mike Bianchi, alluded to the fact that these are really kind of informal meetings at the end of the year, that most of the stuff that they would tell these guys, work on this or work on that, or what were your feelings on the season. So we've kind of already done that stuff before we've gotten to this point. So I would be a little bit surprised if this was like just the first time, like, well, we're winning now. Well, that's news to me. I would be surprised if that was the case, which was why I found that reaction so interesting. And yeah, this is going to be a stressful summer for a lot of these guys, I think.
Maybe. Yeah, we'll see.
Gary Harris, he talked about getting used to a new role, obviously not being as involved, not starting. The most interesting part for me was he was basically asked if he wanted to be back. Mm-hmm. He didn't exactly come out and say yes. He kind of said, like, we'll kind of see what happens. Right. He didn't say, like, yes, I love being here, I wanted to be here. But he did say that he likes being here. He likes everybody. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But he didn't have, like, the Corey Joseph, where Corey Joseph's like, of course I want to be back.
Right, yeah. Gary, if I'm remembering correctly, I remembered thinking, wow, Gary is using a lot of past tense when he's talking about it, liked my time here, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, well, the other part of him, obviously, he's a little bit different situation because he actually is a potential free agent, this summer.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different than some of the other guys we've talked about. But yeah, it was a lot more past tense than I think we heard from anybody else. So that was interesting.
I loved his answer when they asked him about, the approach to, the team shifting towards like a win now focus. And he said, yeah, it's exactly as it should be. That was refreshing to see, like, guys like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Gary, who have been in like really competitive, high level winning environments, reiterating the fact that, yes, that is the natural progression for where this team is at. You have Franz, you have Paolo, you have other promising pieces. It's time to now, like, get real about what we're doing. Like, we ain't playing house no more. Like, it is time to go. Moving on to Anthony Black. One of his biggest takeaways for the season was he said that it was good that our team was able to stay together. He said that he felt like he made a lot of growth in a lot of areas, but he's going to be working on things like shooting, dribbling, finishing through contact, and creating his own shot this summer. And he said he's going to split his time between Orlando and Dallas, but spend most of his time in Orlando, just like he did last season. And then he was asked about what he thought about his, aggression. And that was a common theme with Jamal Mosley throughout the year when talking about Anthony Black and talking about his ability to be aggressive and how it could, really change things for the Magic. And he said, he's like, I don't know. I felt like I did a good job with what was given to me, which to me, again, reading kind of between the lines here, he still wants more of an opportunity. And we saw that he was given more of an opportunity this year, but that was definitely something where his opportunities were very up and down. Like, he was starting, he was like the main guy in the bench unit, then he wasn't getting as much minutes. And we saw that really fluctuate throughout the year. And to his credit, really came on strong towards the end of the year, which was much needed. But it does kind of feel like a guy that was like, I was the 6th pick in the draft, and I still don't really know what my role is on a month-to-month basis with this team, and I'm not really being given the opportunity that I think I'm deserving of and that I'm capable of handling. So I like that about Anthony Black, though. Like, I don't see that as like a problem or anything weird. He's not trying to make it out to like he's the guy or like go out there and make it about you. Like, he's not doing any of that kind of crazy stuff. But he's so confident in his abilities that he's like, no, I should be given more of an opportunity because I'm really good and I know I can help this team. So some people might take that kind of a weird way, but I didn't at all. I really like hearing that from him.
Yeah, 100% agree. The other thing that was interesting, someone asked him about Summer League, if he's going to play Summer League this year. And he was like, we haven't talked about it. What did you hear the very last thing he said? Like,
I think he's like, I hope not.
Exactly. Yeah, he pretty much said, I hope I'm not playing, but he was open to it. He ended the last sentence by saying
you love hearing that, but a guy going into his 3rd year, that was the 6th pick in the draft, you don't really want to see that guy in Summer League.
And I'm sure he probably doesn't really want. Well, he obviously said that, but like the optics of a 3rd-year guy,
Right.
top 6 pick playing in summer league, not always the best. So there's the pride issue there too. And I don't mean an issue, but like there's also pride on the line, I guess I should say, if he ends up being asked to do that. But I thought that was kind of funny as well.
And I love the fact that he talked about shooting, dribbling, finishing through contact, creating his own shot, late in the shot clock, all that kind of stuff. Because the Magic need more of that. And we've seen a lot of flashes from Anthony Black of being able to do that. So him kind of evolving that and being able to take that to the next level, to me, is really exciting.
Yep.
Next, Corey Joseph. He said this was his favorite season for a guy who has won an NBA championship, back in, I think it was 2014 with the Spurs. To say that this season, with its crazy and up and downs, as emotional as it was, for him to say that this was his favorite season speaks to a couple of things. Obviously, he's later in his career, and you always, as you age and mature, you appreciate things a lot more, even if, like, to the outside world, they're not as big of a deal, like playing with the Magic and, being one of the reasons that they're able to turn their season around and 41 wins, 41 losses, losing the Celtics in 5 games versus winning an NBA championship on one of the greatest basketball dynasties that we have in the modern era is awesome. I heard that and I was like, "Aw, Corey, like that's just really heartwarming to hear that." And just everything that I've heard, like the dude just seems like a phenomenal human being. And it also just speaks to like what we're building here. We say it all the time, but everybody talks about the culture and how much everybody likes each other. It's really easy to say that stuff, but when all of the like peripheral stuff is proof of that, like stuff like this, like you don't say that if there isn't an awesome environment that you get to work in every day. So I thought that was really cool. He was asked if he wanted to be back. He said, of course. Yeah. And he's like, I just said it's my favorite season. Of course I want to be back, joking with the reporters. And then he was asked about how close he thinks the Magic are to contention. And he said, I think we're very close. Now, everyone's going to say that, but for a guy who has seen it, who has been on a team that got it all done, for him to at least hold the public opinion that this team is very close to contention, that's not you like hearing that. It might just be him saying that, but I think we all believe that to a certain degree.
Yeah, and I would also just say all of those things combined, I think there's a non-zero chance that he's back next year. Magic, it's a $3.4 million team option. We said he was, break glass in case of emergency type player. We had an emergency, he had to play. But I think in an ideal world, he doesn't really play, this season. But we just weren't given that. And so I think, we just talked about like what a great vet to have around, what a great guy to have on your roster to help some of the younger guys. And so a lot of people dismissing, saying it's his last game and all that kind of stuff. I'm not so sure. That's a cheap deal. It's a team option. So we'll see. But yeah, it was nice to hear Corey enjoyed the season because he's a harder guy to read, right? He's not super, emotional and all those kinds of things when you see him on the court. So to just hear him verbally say, yeah, this is one of my favorite seasons ever. It's pretty cool. And obviously glad we had Corey this season for sure.
If we get the Corey Joseph that we thought we were getting this year, again, the break glass in case of emergency, sit on the bench, never sees the floor other than garbage time Corey Joseph, I am 100% on board for bringing him back next season. I think he has the championship pedigree. I feel like he's great in the locker room. And the guy is serviceable in a very big pinch. So, yeah, I'm all for bringing Goga Batadze back. That's where we're going now.
I figured.
I am for bringing Goga Batadze back, as a matter of fact. Not much from Goga. For me, the biggest thing was that he's going to work on his shooting in the summer, which he said is already there, but it's just about having the confidence to take those in games, which is really true for everyone. And then I love the quote from him talking about Jalen Suggs. He said, Jalen Suggs is our heart. And he said he almost forces you to play defense with just the way that he plays and the effort and the intensity that he brings. And again, it just shows you how important Jalen Suggs is to this team. I've seen some crazy nonsensical kind of stuff about people saying, oh, I'm fine if we trade Jalen Suggs, all that kind of I don't think you realize quite how good he actually is and impactful he is on the floor. but I don't think you realize how important that dude is to this team and the way that they defend and the way that they play. So
did you see our record without him? Like, anyone asking that question? Did you see our record without him? Not good. Not good at all.
Jet Howard. I actually thought that Jet's interview was short, but I thought there was some pretty notable things that came out of that. I said earlier, he mentioned this year he learned what to do, what not to do, and in terms of like the preparation, mental, and team aspects. He also said, I could have played better, evaluating his own season. I could have played better. Went on to say, impacted the game more. And then he said, that's what next year is for. Jet Howard, 11th pick in the draft, going into your third year. Really, really hope that's the case. And then I found that this was pretty interesting. They asked what his summer is going to look like, and he said, I'm going to be playing as much 5-on-5 as possible this summer. And then he said, I don't like doing individual skill work, which at first I was like, I don't really love you saying that. But when he went on to say, like, it's just not realistic situations, and I just prefer to like work on my game in games. And he said, that's kind of what's I've seen the most growth from. I'm not really going to argue with a guy who got to the NBA by doing things a certain way. And like what works for you works for you. I'm sure there will be some individual work. More than anything, what I want to see from Jet Howard going into next year, the shooting, I believe, will be there. If he gets enough minutes, enough reps, all that kind of stuff, I believe he is going to be like a very, very, very good NBA three-point shooter. I just want to see him be able to defend competently and consistently. If Jet Howard can do that, if Jet Howard can be as good of a defender as Caleb Houston next year, to me, that's a win. I'm not even talking necessarily about the Magic. Would I love to be able to bring Jet Howard in, pop him into the rotation, and give the Magic like instant offense? Because not only can he shoot, he can create off the dribble. I feel like he's a really good connector and passer, all that kind of good stuff. But if he can be good or passable defensively, sure, that would be awesome for the Magic. I want to see Jet Howard be a successful NBA player, whether it's here or elsewhere. But it does seem like his only route to that happening is becoming passable defensively, which at this point, he just is not. And it's not for lack of like physical ability. It's just like you have to want it and you have to be locked in on that end on every possession. If he can get there, like I love the ability of Jet Howard being like the Caleb Houston, where like, hey, things aren't working right now. We're going to throw somebody else into the lineup, kind of see what happens and see what you can get from Jet Howard. I think next year there's going to be even less room for stuff like that, unfortunately. But I believe in Jet Howard's talent offensively for sure. He's just got to be able to figure it out defensively. So that I think will be really big for him. So some of that stuff was interesting. And then the last thing that he said about the offense was he said it didn't, quote unquote, flow the right way. He said sometimes it did and we looked awesome, but overall it didn't quite flow the right way. I would have loved to follow up on that. Like, what do you mean you didn't think it flowed the right way? But Kevin, did any of that stand out to you? I know you're off the Jet Howard train. Well, I'm not trying to.
I know I'm talking to a Jet Howard truther.
No, dude.
But Jonathan, like to say like individual.
I'm saying what I would like. I'm not saying what is likely. I'm saying what I would like to see.
Hear what I'm saying. I'm saying I think you're giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the individual workout stuff. Like that could
be fair.
That's a kind of crazy thing to say, Jonathan. Like there are 0.0 elite NBA players that didn't get better through individual workouts. 0% of good NBA players. You can say, yeah, he made it to the NBA, all that kind of stuff.
Fair.
I'm sorry. It's just not a thing. It's not a thing. So
that was surprising. In the moment, I was like, that's a crazy thing to say, but like you're kind of cooking. But maybe
it is a crazy thing to say. I'll just be honest with you. However, the other thing I do understand is him saying he's going to play 5-on-5 because he just didn't get a lot of opportunity to do that this year. No, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I'm being serious. Like from October to May, how much 5-on-5 was he really able to do? Probably not a lot. So he's going to want to spend time this summer getting that in so that he could potentially be ready for next year, potentially on the Magic or otherwise. So I think you're being giving him a little bit too much of the benefit of the doubt. That's a crazy thing to say.
I really wanted to work out for Jet Howard in Orlando or otherwise. I still think it's pretty interesting that he didn't really spend any time with Osceola this year.
Yeah.
Like in his second year, I mean, last year, Caleb Houston's second year, we saw him spend a good amount of time with Osceola, and it seemed to really benefit him. I'm just surprised that we didn't see that from Jet Howard. But yeah, you're probably right there. Moving on to Tristan, again, another short one. Like as you get down the line, these kind of start to get shorter and shorter. He was asked about like the challenge and like handling changing roles where he was in the starting lineup and then he was in the bench unit and then he wasn't playing and then he was and then he wasn't. He said it was tough. Was asked about the rookie wall and he said, well, you've never played that many games before in your life. So there is a moment during the season where you feel tired. And then he talked about working on his base for like the main thing that he's working on this season. I took that as mostly just like his like offensive and defensive stances. He talked about being able to move out of his base with more power, off the dribble into shooting in his defensive stance, all that kind of stuff. So seems like he's getting back to like the fundamentals this offseason. And I know we're going to do player grades, later on in the offseason here, but I'm still really encouraged from what we saw with Tristan da Silva this year. I do understand, like, hey, if you have to put him in a deal to make some of this stuff work this summer, it probably makes sense. But that's a guy that I would really, really, really like to be able to hold on to. Because once he figures out the shooting, we saw him be able to do some stuff off the dribble, solid defender. I hope that's not a guy that's a guy I think that we could trade. And then 3 or 4 years from now, we could be like, man, that would be a really nice guy to have.
Yeah, 100% agree. And then I also, like you said, really liked his answers as well. Like he obviously is an older rookie, right? So he's been around organized basketball for a long time. But to hear him like have a good understanding of some of the highs from his season, but also knowing some of the things he needs to work on, this offseason and going forward, I was very encouraged by that. But yeah, a big fan of Tristan, and I agree. Definitely a guy I'd be disappointed and sad if he was part of those potential trade deals we're talking about.
Caleb Houston, man of many words,
the shortest of all of them, right?
I think so. Pretty close, if not the shortest. He was asked, did it help getting more minutes this year to sort of be more consistent and be more confident? He said it definitely helped a lot. And this summer, he's going to work on defense and shooting off the move, which we had like a month stretch where Caleb Houston was awesome shooting the ball. So again, a really cheap deal, but that could be a guy that could be like, hey, like this is what he did for us in a month. If you're trading him away to a young rebuilding team where he can get some more opportunity and a team wants to take a flyer on a guy for $2 million, kind of in the final year of his contract next year, that could be a guy that could be included in a deal. And then last but not least, Mac McClung, which I love Mac. The couple of times we've been able to be around him and just everything that you hear, like to a person in the organization, everybody loves Mac. He's so humble, just really, really nice guy. He mentioned that his value in the league isn't necessarily like his talent, which he is talented. I don't think he was trying to say that he's not, but he said that his value is that he is a winner and a competitor, and he's been on kind of winning teams wherever he has been on NBA rosters in the league. They, of course, asked him about the dunk contest, and he said that he would probably lean towards not doing it again, but he said that time of year comes around and you kind of just never know. And then I thought this was a really awesome answer from him. He was basically asked, like, at this point, like, do you believe that you're an NBA player and that, like, you should be on a roster at this point? And he said, someone told him that you deserve nothing in this league. And that's just a great perspective to have in life in general, that, like, hey, like, at the end of the day, we all have this kind of belief in this standard of, like, what people deserve and what they don't. Like, at the end of the day, no one really owes you anything. So he's just going to continue to work and be the best version of himself and the best player and best teammate that he can be. Was there anything else that you had from your I don't know, what would you consider that, a neighbor, Gate City, from where you are in Virginia?
Well, I'm not in Virginia now, where my family in Virginia is.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, the listeners may not. They may not know I'm not in Virginia. But great guy. a lot of question marks for him, but he's also kind of used to that. All these guys that are G League or two-way guys, they're used to, unfortunately, it's just the nature of it, bouncing around year to year. Obviously, we're fortunate enough to have him for back-to-back seasons in Osceola, but we'll see maybe what the offseason holds for Mac.
Yeah. And then after the exit interviews, I think that was Friday, Anthony Parker was on In the Zone with Brandon Kravitz on 96.9 The Game. One thing that I think the biggest takeaway was Brandon Kravitz asked about the Windhorse quote from his podcast, The Hoop Collective, after the trade deadline, where, paraphrasing here, he said, the Magic don't make calls. They don't do trades. Like, they just don't. And we kind of came out when that quote started to circulate, and we said, this sounds like someone who talked to like 3 or 4 GMs and then just try to like extrapolate that for the rest of the league and say, like, drew just a massive conclusion from a few conversations that he had. And Anthony Parker basically said that he stopped short of saying that that's not the truth. Essentially said that that's not exactly accurate, and you would have to ask Brian Windhorst exactly where he got that information and what he was trying to speak to. And then again, he also mentioned that they were making calls, you know, and they're always kind of quote unquote doing their job in exploring how to make the team better. But he again went to the same point of Jeff Weltman and saying that really what we were looking at was expiring contracts. And I'm just kind of piecing together the logic here that, okay, you guys are trying to get underneath the apron, or you're trying to open up cap space so you have more flexibility this offseason. You were trying to get some short-term shooting help, but you didn't want to give up anything of value that you knew you most likely were not going to retain. So I started to look at some of like the guys who are going to be free agents this year, and in terms of like real guard help, when you look at the guys who are going to be free agents this year and you start to piece together who they might have been targeting, I really cannot argue with them not wanting to give up anything of value. Like, you start going down the list and you see like Bruce Brown Jr. Were we going to give up anything of value for a couple of months of Bruce Brown Jr.? No. Does Bruce Brown Jr. even probably really move the needle? No. Malcolm Brogdon, that's a guy that you probably could argue would move the needle. But am I giving up Anthony Black or anything of value or a first round pick or anything like that for 2 months of Malcolm Brogdon? No, I'm just going to continue to go through names here. You can stop me when you're like, oh, hey, actually, we should have made the move for that guy. Spoiler alert, it's not going to happen. Tim Hardaway Jr., D'Angelo Russell, Luke Kennard, Dennis Schroeder, Trey Jones, Vasily Micic, Javon Carter, Malik Beasley, Davion Mitchell, Aaron Holiday, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, either these guys wouldn't have been available regardless, or you're not trading anything of value for 2 months of those guys. So everything that we know, and all we know is what we're told. We don't know absolutely what the truth is, but going off of what we know, I don't necessarily agree with the approach. But if that was their approach and that was their mindset, then I would agree with the decision and conclusion that they came to. However, what I would counter is, why wouldn't you go out and get a guy that you knew would be here for 2 to 3 years, maybe beyond this season? And in that case, maybe would have been more willing to give up trade assets or, you know, draft capital or whatever the case may be. Because again, to Jeff Weltman's quote, everybody is trying to squeeze everybody. So whatever leverage you thought maybe you had or didn't have during the trade deadline and that whole part of the season, you're probably going to have, at the bare minimum, the same, if not less leverage going into the offseason. So, but again, with the philosophy that they're throwing out into the ethos now and kind of seeing what would have been available and maybe putting together the logic there, I would agree with the conclusion that they came to with that thought process. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I see where they were heading.
Right. And the good news is, what's different about the offseason versus in-season trades is, you know, obviously we are, you know, watching this team like a hawk. We're diehard fans, so we understand the circumstances. We understand how we feel like this team could be quote unquote squeezed. The good news is there's half a dozen to a dozen other teams that are also in situations this summer, different than the Magic, but situations this summer where everybody in the league knows what they're trying to do, right? Whether it's a team that's going to go all in on tanking, or a team that's going to go all in on trying to get better, or a team that's going to go all in trading a disgruntled star, right? Like every summer, there's a bunch of teams that everybody knows what they're trying to do. So that is one silver lining with the offseason, where the Magic, while we feel there's a big target on our back because everybody knows what we need, that also can be said for a lot of other teams. So, but yeah, when you look across that list, not a whole lot of guys you'd sacrifice a lot of future assets for when it comes to some of those guys.
Yeah. Kev, this is officially our longest episode in who freaking knows how long. There's a lot to go through here.
But the good thing is it's all evergreen. So, hopefully people have taken the whole week maybe to listen to this a little bit at a time over the course of the 5 days. But yeah, it's all interesting stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of taking some time, we took a little bit of time from the end of the season, wanted to just catch our breath before we kind of had another pod here. But now we are going to take a little bit more time now that really we put an entire bow on this season, right?
Yeah.
There's not going to be any more news coming out in the very near future with the Magic. All the exit interviews are done. Like, we're officially putting the 2024-2025 season to bed and now looking ahead. So Kevin and I are going to take a little bit of time off here. And then come back with a full slate of off-season content. That's going to be part of us taking some time off, is getting together and saying, hey, this is what we need to do. What guests do we want to bring on the pod, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, we would always love to hear your feedback as our listeners and viewers. If there's something specific that either we've done in previous off seasons that you really liked and you want to see again, or maybe something that we haven't done or haven't tried before that you would like to see or you would like to hear, please let us know. We're always up to suggestions. Usually the way that the offseason moves is like we have a little bit of a break, then we get into draft stuff, right? We'll do that this year. And then we get into free agency stuff. And then usually we have some kind of like international type of competition with Franz and Goga and some of the other guys to get us through August. And then like the last few weeks of August and like the first 3 weeks, we have like a 5-week window where there's just nothing. And then all of a sudden Magic basketball is back. So that's just kind of like a brief rundown of how the offseason is going to go. But we're not going to have a lot with free agency. We're not going to have a lot potentially with international basketball.
I was just going to say a couple dates to keep in mind. It's not quite like last summer where we had a bunch of important dates when it comes to like contract extensions and stuff, but the club options for this year, the team options, are the deadline for that is June 29th. So Corey Joseph, Mo Wagner, Gary Harris will get an idea before or on June 29th whether those three guys are going to be back on that team option deal. But and Caleb Houston. I almost forgot about Caleb Houston. But yeah, so those are the four. But outside of that, we already talked about the Paolo extension. He's eligible for that as soon as the finals are over. So yeah, those are some of the key dates between now and I guess, free agency starting in July.
And looking a little bit even further, like as we get into the start of the season, Halloween will be Tristan da Silva, Jet Howard, and Anthony Black. They all have club option extensions for the 2026-2027 season. Tristan da Silva, Anthony Black, if they're still on the roster because they haven't been traded, those absolutely will be picked up. The Jet Howard club option for $7.3 million, that will be something to watch. At this point, I would not be shocked. I don't even know where I would fall. Would I be surprised? Would I not be surprised? Like it's really that close in terms of whether or not I think they pick up that club option.
Mm-hmm.
Will you be surprised if they pick it up?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. All right. Hey, Kevin has spoken.
Yes, I would.
All right. Good grief, man.
I definitely would be surprised.
All right. Awesome. I guess you have, tell me how you really feel. Or please actually don't tell me how you really feel.
29% from three, Jonathan. 29% from three this year.
Yeah. I mean,
he's a 3-point shooter.
I don't think that's totally fair, but
okay.
We've got a lot of guys on this team who are quote unquote 3-point shooters that did not shoot the ball well this year.
Yep, that's true.
Yep. All right. We're putting a bow on the season. We're putting a bow on this episode. That's going to do it for this one. For Kevin Tucker, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to The Sixth Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at 6 Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!